Australia has had many significant moments throughout its history, starting with the arrival of Aboriginal ancestors from maritime Southeast Asia between 50,000 and 65,000 years ago. In January 1788, the first fleet, commanded by Captain Arthur Phillip, arrived in Sydney Cove with over 1,400 people, including convicts, marines, sailors, civil officers and free settlers. This event marked the establishment of a penal colony and paved the way for a great wave of immigration to Australia. In July of 1851, gold was discovered in Orange, New South Wales. Later, in 1854, the Ballarat gold rush occurred, bringing in miners from far and wide. The Eureka Rebellion took place, where 1,500 miners rebelled against colonial authority over mining rights, licences and enforcement actions. This rebellion is considered Australia's first civil war and played a significant role in establishing democracy in the country. On January 1st, 1901, the self-governing colonies of Western Australia, Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia, Victoria and Tasmania agreed to form the Commonwealth of Australia, and the new federal government on March 1st established the Australian Imperial Forces, known as the AIF. Following an escalation between the British Empire and the Southern African Boer Republics, the Second Boer War began in October 1899. The Australian colonies, as part of the British Empire, sent contingents, and from 1901 to May 1902, the federal government provided troops from the fledgling AIF. Australia was in the middle of a double dissolution election when Britain declared war on Germany in August 1914. The Prime Minister, Joseph Cook, as well as opposition leader Andrew Fisher, who would win the election and become the Prime Minister, both pledged Australia's full support. All dominions of the British Empire, including Australia, were also at war with Germany. After the armistice in 1918, Australia was still in the grip of the Spanish flu pandemic, infecting 500 million people worldwide. William Morris Hughes, the Prime Minister of Australia, at the 1919 Paris Peace Conference, secured Australian control of the former German colony of Papua Guinea. The 1920s, also known as the Jazz and the Roaring Twenties, was a period of significant change and prosperity. By the mid-1920s, Australia's economy suffered due to competition from other countries, leading to the fall in commodities prices. On October 24, 1929, Wall Street stock market crashed, leading to severe economic downturn worldwide. The Great Depression lasted until March 1933, when global economies began to slowly recover. Japan invaded the Chinese province of Manchuria.
1931. Japanese troops leave for the conquest of Manchuria. Japan to go on a career of international conquest and pillage. Shanghai in 1937. Full-scale warfare against China. The world was still unready to deal properly with such wanton aggression. Japan's diplomats addressing the League of Nations attempted to justify their crimes against peace and decency, and then walked out.
The Japanese Prime Minister Hideki Tojo's reaction was swift. He said, "We have nothing to fear in fighting the US and Britain." On September 1st, 1939, Germany launched an attack on Poland to reclaim lost territory.
Poland and the world learned the meaning of a grim new word, blitzkrieg. Success is unimpeded as Hitler's divisions move against outnumbered Polish defenders. Later, on other world battlefronts, the Allies are to destroy the myth of the invincibility.
The Polish wireless also says that anti-aircraft fire drove off a German attack about 20 miles from Warsaw this morning, and that one of the German bombers was brought down. The German wireless says that the German aeroplanes are dropping their bombs only on military objectives in accordance with instructions. The German wireless also announces that in Danzig this morning, Herr Forster called on Dr. Burkhardt, the League High Commissioner, and that afterwards Dr. Burkhardt and his staff left Danzig. The swastika flag was then hoisted over the office of the League Commissioner. The German news agency says that the decision to transfer Danzig to Germany has been communicated to all diplomatic representatives in Danzig, and that these representatives have been given every protection. At 5:30 this morning, Herr Hitler, as Supreme Commander of the German Armed Forces, issued a proclamation to the German people. It began by repeating allegations against the Poles and continued, "From now on, I have no other choice than to meet force with force. The Germans will fight the battle for the honor and vital rights of reborn Germany with hard determination."
I am speaking to you from the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
Fellow Australians, it is my melancholy duty to inform you officially that in consequence of a persistence by Germany in her invasion of Poland, Great Britain has declared war upon her, and that as a result, Australia is also at war. No harder task can fall to the lot of a democratic leader than to make such an announcement.
On September 27, 1940, Japan signed a pact with Italy and Germany. Then, on December 7, 1941, without warning, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, drawing America into World War II.
Hello NBC, this is KKU in Honolulu, Hawaii. I am speaking from the roof of the Advertiser Publishing Company building. We have witnessed this morning the distant view, a British battle off Pearl Harbor, and a severe bombing of Pearl Harbor by enemy planes undoubtedly Japanese, and considerable damage done. This battle has been going on for nearly 3 hours. One of the bombs dropped within 50 feet of KKU Tower. It is no joke, it is a real war. There has been fierce fighting going on in the air and on the sea. We cannot estimate yet how much damage has been done, but it has been a very severe attack. From the NBC newsroom in New York, President Roosevelt said in a statement today that the Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii from the air. I'll repeat that. President Roosevelt says that the Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii from the air.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The United States was at peace with that nation, and at the solicitation of Japan, was still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific, to deceive the United States by false statements and expressions of hope for continued peace. The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands has caused severe damage to American naval and military forces. I regret to tell you that very many American lives have been lost. Japan has therefore undertaken a surprise offensive extending throughout the Pacific area. The facts of yesterday and today speak for themselves. The people of the United States have already formed their opinions and well understand the implications to the very life and safety of our nation.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister.
Men and women of Australia, we are at war with Japan. That has happened because in the first instance, Japanese naval and air forces launched an unprovoked attack on British and United States territory. Because our vital interests are imperiled, and because the rights of free people in the whole Pacific are assailed. As a result, the Australian government this afternoon took the necessary steps which will mean that a state of war exists between Australia and Japan. We did not want war in the Pacific. The Australian government has repeatedly made it clear, as have the governments of the United Kingdom, the United States and the Netherlands East Indies, that if war came to the Pacific, it would be of Japan's making.
Due to economic, political and social turmoil and their reliance on raw material imports to fuel their growing industries, marked the dawn of Japanese military aggression. As they rapidly advanced through Southeast Asia and the South Pacific, the Japanese army aimed to capture Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea. In early 1941, Port Moresby had few trained personnel with only a civil administration and Christian missions. Christian missionaries arrived in Papua in 1847. The Church of England in Australia established the Australian Border Mission in Sydney in 1850. The first missionaries sent out to Papua, Reverend Albert McLaren and Reverend Copeland King, established the Dagura Mission on the Dagura Plateau. May Frances Hayman, born on January 30th, 1906 in Mile End, Adelaide, South Australia, the daughter of Francis Edward and Marion Hayman, was one of the individuals who pursued missionary work in Papua Guinea. Mavis Parkinson also felt a calling to pursue missionary work, but neither of them knew at the time how their paths would eventually intersect. Mavis, the eldest daughter of William Bretherton and Eileen Maisie Parkinson, born October 10, 1915 in Ipswich, Queensland, was educated at St Michael's Girls' Grammar School and had one sibling, Betty, who was born August 25, 1921. An active member of St Paul's Church of England, Mavis taught in the kindergarten Sunday school and from an early age desired to become a missionary. After completing her teacher training, Mavis departed Australia in January 1941 to work as a missionary teacher at the Gona mission station in northern Papua Guinea. Reverend John Badger Bishop used to update the mission personnel twice a day through shortwave radio broadcasts. After the Japanese captured Rabaul on the 23rd of January 1942, the Anglican Bishop of Papua, Reverend Philip Strong, sent a message to the missionaries at 3:30 p.m, encouraging them to faithfully remain at their posts.
No matter what the cost may ultimately be to any of us individually, God expects this of us. No one requires us to leave. Many already think us fools and mad. What does that matter? If we are fools, we are fools for Christ's sake. I cannot foretell the future. I cannot guarantee. But all will be well, that we shall all come through unscathed.
On January 25, 1942, an official order instructing everyone to evacuate the area. May Hayman, Mavis Parkinson and Father Benson decided to stay and continued their missionary work. On March the 7th, Bishop Strong was considering relocating May and Mavis to Isavita. Lieutenant Wes Dixon, a 24-year-old American pilot of a B-25 Mitchell bomber, took off from 7 Mile Drome near Port Moresby on a bombing mission against Lae Airfield. On board were Corporal Earl Savine and a ground crew member joining the mission formation of 6 bombers, led by Captain Herman Lowery, Commanding Officer 13 Bombardment Squadron, with pilots First Lieutenant Frank Timlin and Second Lieutenant Kill, Shearer and Byrne. After taking flight, 1 bomber aborted the formation, leaving only 5 to carry out the mission. After dropping their bombs, they flew towards Gona, undetected due to haze. A solitary Japanese fighter made a head-on pass against Lieutenant Dixon's bomber, hitting the right engine and nose, killing 2 crew, Walpole and Savine. Lieutenant Dixon ordered the rest of the crew to bail out, and while holding the bomber level long enough for them to escape, the other crew were dead and went in with the bomber, crashing near Cape Luina. Lieutenant Dixon landed in a shallow tree-filled swamp. He was rescued by natives who took him to their village at Faduta, then on to Gona mission. On many evenings, Mavis took her portable phonograph and Gilbert and Sullivan records, joining West on the tropical sea foreshore, and sang along with the scratcher recordings. On June 6, 1942, Lieutenant Dixon left for the Gura mission on the schooner McLaren King, then on a Dutch ship back to Australia for medical treatment of his arm at Townsville Hospital in North Queensland. One morning at approximately 11 o'clock on June 6, 1942, Lieutenant Howard C. Winkler, an American pilot, flew low overhead in a P-400 Airacobra near the Gona mission and was attacked by 3 Japanese Zero aircraft. He didn't have enough time to escape the cockpit before his parachute released completely and perished on impact. Mavis Parkinson was the first to reach him, followed by May Hayman and Father Benson. There was nothing they could do, and returned to the mission with his shattered body. He was buried in the little church cemetery by Father Benson. When the Japanese soldiers arrived at the mission building, there was an indication that there were people who had recently left in a hurry. After searching and finding no one there, Second Lieutenant Ida said, "They can't be far, look for them." Then a crackling voice was heard over the radio. "Head for Dakota immediately." The escape party trekked through the jungle before being found by village people who built them a cottage in the bush where they stayed hidden for several months. During this period, Mavis and May wrote a letter to their families in Australia, not knowing of their fate and completely cut off from the outside world. On July the 27th, 1942, Reverend Holland, John Duffield, Lucidian Dapidia, Marjorie Betchley, Lilia Lashmore were at a secret camp near Isavita. They planned to flee the area by walking across the Owen Stanley Mountains by the Mangalese area, which was thought to be a shorter route than the Kokoda Trail. The group left for Sapati village, where they were fed and sheltered for the night. Departing the next day, none of the locals helped them carry their cargo. At Suwa, the group encountered 5 others, commanded by Captain Austin, the manager of a coffee plantation in Haigatshru, who were attempting to reach Oro Bay, a located boat, to flee down the coast. Crossing the Crumbro Creek, the group were overcome by Okavarian natives who killed Tapati with an axe and tied up the other men, who took the group to Mbai village, where they were detained and turned over to the Japanese, then taken by truck to Buna Bay, where the Japanese beheaded them and cast their bodies into the sea. Reverend Vivian Redlich, whose father was an English priest, had recently become engaged to May Hayman. Both worked at various mission stations about 40 kilometres apart. He attempted a brave journey overland from Kaipa to save his fiancée. During his journey, he wrote a letter to his father. "Dear Dad, the war has busted up. I got back from Tagura and ran right into it, and am now somewhere in my parish, trying to carry on, though my people are horribly scared. No news of May, and I'm cut off from contacting her. My staff, okay, so far, but in another spot. I'm trying to stick whatever happens. If I don't come out of it, just rest content. I've tried to do my job faithfully. Rush chance of getting word out, so forgive brevity. God bless you all, Vivian." Six Okavarian tribesmen armed with spears killed Vivian several weeks after he set out to rescue May. Every day, the mission group in hiding received rumours of Japanese movements. One morning, August 2nd, 1942, Sergeant Hewitt and Signaller Palmer arrived at their camp with news that several American airmen, with 3 Australians, were 2.5 hours downstream at Deuna. That afternoon, they met with a group of Australian and Papuan Infantry Battalion soldiers. led by Australian Army Lieutenant Arthur Archer Smith, in company with Sergeant Robert Hugh Hanna, Corporals Harry Douglas and Private Ralph John Hoyoke, as well as 4 American airmen, shot down attacking Japanese shipping Parker, Hopi, Dean, Claude LaRocque, and Papuan Infantry Battalion soldiers, who were on their way to cross the Kokoda Trail and break through the Japanese lines to reach Port Moresby. May and Mavis decided that they wanted to attempt the journey too. The group was now solely dependent on 5 Papuan Infantry Battalion soldiers, with 24-year-old Lieutenant Smith taking charge of the entire party, the American Senior Lieutenant second in charge. They set off towards Tajiri the next morning, staying on the main route and feeling quite safe from the Japanese. They travelled as far away as possible from Popondetta during the night before embarking on the Kokoda route. While attempting to cross the track 60 kilometres east of Kokoda, they were ambushed by Japanese patrols. Immediately taking defensive positions, Lieutenant Parker, American pilot Hagee with a Tommy gun, and other Australians hunkered and covered the trail. 2 with weapons stood behind them, while May, Mavis, Father Benson, and machine gunner American Corporal Hopi, who had splinters on both hands from a bursting pom-pom, took refuge hiding in the grass. 4 Australians were killed in the first round of gunfire. Many Papuan infantry were also killed. Others ran into the bush, leaving Father Benson alone, sometimes hearing Haig's Tommy gun roar and always drifting further away. 3 escaping Americans were lost when they encountered a group of hostile natives. 1 of the Americans was speared, while the remaining 2 were beaten to death. Father Benson became lost in the bush without food or water for 6 days and nights before being found wandering on a road by Japanese soldiers and taken prisoner. After 2 days and nights, exhausted from the attack, Lieutenant Smith fell by a tree. Several natives found him and brought him to Mboji, the village constable. Mboji was kind to Smith for a few days, offering him food and water and shelter before betraying him to the Japanese. On August the 28th, an interpreter in Buna named Sato questioned Smith about the number of firearms in Port Moresby, the number of troops in Papua, and their locations. They informed him that if he told them he'd be treated as a prisoner of war. If he did not comply, he would never see his family again. Smith responded that he didn't know, and then they executed him. May and Mavis managed to survive the ambush and spent several days struggling through the jungle until they were eventually discovered by natives. The natives took them to Dabadoo village, where the 2 had stayed the day before the attack. They spent the night in a garden house located in the village. The next morning, 2 boys led the women down a road they thought would take them to their desired destination, but instead led them to a coffee plantation where they came across Japanese soldiers cleaning rice in a creek. The surprised Japanese soldiers apprehended the women and placed them inside a coffee hut. The next morning, a villager attempted to see the women, but was waved away by Mavis. He returned to the high grass and saw the women crying while the Japanese taunted and interrogated them. The next morning, 4 Japanese soldiers, 2 with spades, passed by his hiding area. They led the 2 women to a nearby coffee plantation. A Japanese guard attempted to rape Mavis. She struggled, and he drew his bayonet in full view of May, stabbing Mavis in the side, and she fell to the ground. May screamed, and another Japanese soldier stabbed May in the throat. The 2 women were thrown in a shallow grave, one on top of the other. The families of May and Mavis learned of their daughter's fate through official channels. Bishop Strong paid visits to both Canberra and Ipswich. Mavis' family was hostile towards Bishop Strong, who received a very hard, bitter letter on the 23rd of October 1942 from her father, accusing him of sacrificing his daughter's life.
I will always hold you responsible for the death of my daughter and can assure you that my opinion and belief is shared by many in New South Wales who have not hesitated yet to condemn this unnecessary tragedy. Then evolve free perhaps some day, I might be afforded an opportunity of meeting you, and until then.
The bodies of May Hayman and Mavis Parkinson were exhumed and identified by Corporal Christian on March the 25th, 1943, at the coffee plantation in the presence of civil magistrates Captain Burrell, Dr. McKenna, Dr. Veron, and Papua natives. Mavis' body was lying half on its side beneath May's body. May was clothed in a pink dress, knickers, thick socks and shoes. Examination revealed a hole in her neck. Mavis was also clothed in print dress and knickers, but no shoes or socks. A wound was identified on the left side of her ribs. The bodies were in an advanced state of decomposition, making it difficult to determine the cause of death. On February the 26th, 1943, their remains were reburied in a small plot in the Sangara Mission grounds. 3 Australian signallers with a native Christian attended the burial service. Many native women and children laid flowers on the graves. Later that year, Bishop Strong was addressing a conference when Betty Parkinson, dressed in army khaki, continued interrupting him, challenging the missionary's refusal to leave, accusing him of killing Mavis as if he had shot her. Letters written by May and Mavis were recovered by a native sergeant and brought to the Australian Commandant, Major General G.M. Morris. Major General Morris wrote in part, "I think the spirit displayed in their writings is very wonderful and should serve as an example to many of us frailer mortals. Let me quote the words of a senior staff officer. I desire to express my appreciation at being allowed to pursue these letters, which I consider are the most courageous I have ever seen." Mboji and a handful of his accomplices were executed for murder and treason in Haigatshu in late 1943, in front of hundreds of people. Every man was allowed to speak, and everyone chose to do so. Mboji's remarks had a tremendous impact on everyone present. He said he went wrong because he was uneducated and did not know better. He freely admitted his crimes and said that the punishment he was about to receive was just. The other condemned freely admitted their guilt and were prepared to pay with their lives. The punishment to them was by their own tribal code, an eye for an eye.
I have received this afternoon a message from the Japanese government in reply to the message forwarded to that government by the Secretary of State on August 11th. I deem this reply a full acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration, which specifies the unconditional surrender of Japan. Arrangements are now being made for the formal signing of the surrender terms at the earliest possible moment. General Douglas MacArthur has been appointed the Supreme Allied Commander to receive the Japanese surrender. Great Britain, Russia, and China will be represented by high-ranking officers. Meantime, the Allied armed forces have been ordered to suspend offensive action. The proclamation of VJ Day must await upon the formal signing of the surrender terms by Japan.
We are gathered here, representatives of the major warring powers, to conclude a solemn agreement whereby peace may be restored. The terms and conditions upon which surrender of the Japanese imperial forces is here to be given and accepted are contained in the instrument of surrender now before you. I now invite the representatives of the Emperor of Japan and the Japanese government and the Japanese Imperial General Headquarters to sign the instrument of surrender at the places indicated.
Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu signed for the Japanese government. Japan accepted unconditional surrender according to the provisions of the Potsdam Declaration.
The Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers will now sign on behalf of all the nations at war with Japan. These proceedings are closed.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of Australia, Mr. J.B. Chifley.
Fellow citizens, the war is over. The Japanese government has accepted the terms of surrender imposed by the Allied nations, and hostilities will now cease. The reply by the Japanese government to the note sent by Britain, the United Nations, the USSR and China has been received and accepted by the Allied nations. At this moment, let us offer thanks to God. Let us remember those whose lives were given that we may enjoy this glorious moment and may look forward to a peace which they have won for us.
A stained glass window, a gift from the congregation at St. John's Church, Canberra, featuring Sister Hayman in her uniform and the head of a Papuan, who she was working with during the Japanese invasion, was dedicated by Bishop Bergman during a simple service led by Archdeacon Robertson on Thursday, June the 9th, 1949. In August, the Archbishop of Brisbane, R.C. Hulse, dedicated an erected cross in front of St. Paul's Church of England in remembrance of Mavis Parkinson, who made the ultimate sacrifice. Paying tribute to her work, Mr. Parkinson said that in any way she could help God in this corner of his vineyard, Mavis would do it. I believe she had a vision which gave her inspiration. There was a power about her life. William Bretherson Parkinson went to work as usual on May 16, 1951, at Messrs. Parkinson and Noble's office, but was rushed home after a violent seizure and shortly thereafter passed away at the age of 65 years. Bishop Yashiro, the first Japanese to enter Australia since the war, attended a special service at St. John's Church, Canberra in June 1950 to dedicate a small bamboo memorial cross, one of several sent to Australia by the church in Japan in honour of mission martyrs. We have had a terrible experience in the last 10 years. It is dangerous to be governed by politicians who are not guided by the Holy Spirit. Why can I stand on this pulpit in such a miserable condition of mind? It is simply because I have deep within me a wonderful power of Christian faith. Before leaving Japan for Australia, he directed that all churches mark September 18th as a day of memorial for Sister Frances May Hayman. In 1947, nursing staff at Canberra Community Hospital began fundraising for a memorial to Sister Frances May Hayman and Sister Mona Tate, who was killed by the Japanese at Raja Beach following Singapore's collapse. The main entry hall of Canberra Hospital included a plaque honouring Mona Tate and Frances May Hayman. The memorial prize is awarded to applicants who successfully complete their final nursing exams. St Raphael's Gona Memorial Medical Centre, there is a plaque that reads, "This plaque commemorates the memory of May Hayman and Mavis Parkinson, who faithfully worked for the benefit of the people of the Gona area and finally gave their lives to the cause of Christian witness in August 1942.